survivors of intimate partner violence face a lot of challenges when they decide that it's time to leave an abusive relationship. And of course, they're facing a lot of psychological challenges. They might have, low self-esteem, low self-confidence. They might understandably be really afraid of their partners, and that's one reason they would stay, because their partner is very threatening and has shown them that he's capable of great acts of violence. But there are also a lot of structural barriers and reasons for why people decide, you know what, it might actually be better for me right now to stay in this relationship, even though I'm physically at risk. And one of those barriers, one of the most basic and obvious barriers, is the lack of clean, affordable, safe housing for survivors. So, for example, we don't have enough domestic violence shelters in the United States or really around the world to accommodate all of the people who would like to get out of an abusive relationship. And again, intimate partner violence is all about power and control. So generally, an abusive partner is not just physically harming the woman in his life. He's not just calling her names or accusing her of infidelity, but he's also probably controlling the bank account. In a capitalist society, people don't have any power if they don't have any access to money. So if a woman has been denied access to her bank account for years and years, then how is she going to be able to afford a new apartment? How is she going to be able to come up with the money for a security deposit? If the man who's been abusing her has successfully isolated her from all of her friends and her family and her religious community, she's not going to feel comfortable probably going to anyone and saying, hey, can you give me $1,000 for a security deposit and first month's rent? She might not even be able to afford a cheap hotel, especially if she has children in the picture. And, many, many women in the United States, around the world, have children while they're surviving domestic violence. Women might think, you know what, he's putting his hands on me and he's calling me names, but he actually treats the kids pretty well. So do I want to make my children homeless? Do I want to make my children sleep in the car with me when they could be living in this nice house in the suburbs, and they have all of their toys and their friends here? And so that just sort of gives an example of the intersectionality of the challenges facing women. They feel responsible for the safety and the well-being of their children. And so especially if the man is not harming the children, the women might actually make a decision that to them seems very logical and well thought out, that they would rather put themselves in harm's way in order to give their children a better life. And also in terms of policies for domestic violence shelters, many shelters, unfortunately, won't allow women to stay there if they have children over a certain age, especially teenage boys, right? So if a woman has a 5-year-old son, a shelter might accommodate her. But if she has a 15-year-old son, the shelter might have a policy that says, for whatever reason, oh, he's too close to being a man. He might upset the other people staying here. And so they'll say, we can let you in, but not your son. So again, then that woman is faced with this heart-wrenching decision. Is she going to make her son homeless? Is she going to leave her son at home with the violent father, or just to save herself? And then finally, there's a really interesting aspect in terms of intersections of class and gender, in that wealthy women, upper class women who are being victimized by their partners, sometimes, somewhat ironically, actually have a harder time gaining social service resources. And that's because staff members and personnel at domestic violence shelters or on hotlines make these assumptions that if a woman is coming from a financially stable situation, then she doesn't really need their services. There's some great research done, for example, by one scholar who interviewed these upper class women who told her that when they would call domestic violence hotlines, the hotline staffers would basically say, you don't really need us, right? You can afford to go and get a hotel on your own. You're not the type of victim that we're looking for to help. But of course, if it doesn't really matter if a woman is upper class or lower class, if her abusive partner has denied her access to the bank account and the credit cards, then even though she might have $200,000 in the bank account, if she has been so psychologically threatened and coerced and manipulated into thinking she doesn't deserve access to that money, she might not even think about going to get that money. Or she might try to get the money and discover that her husband has taken her name off of the account.